to the second, thank you, Mike. Welcome to the second online meeting of the 25-26 season for the Ottawa Centre of the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society, which is a group of professionals and students from the many disciplines that are connected with the weather and climate. Today, we are pleased to welcome Professor Mike Brklacich as our speaker on Hope Amidst the Gloom of Climate Change, if I may take the liberty of moving the order around so I don't have a colon. If I were to read the entire biography of Professor Brklacich, I fear there would be no time for his presentation. So here are some highlights. Mike chaired the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Carleton University from 2006 to 2012, during which time he was on one of the teams of the IPCC that received the Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore in 2007. That's just one example of his work in multidisciplinary teams. Mike is now a professor emeritus at Carleton, and in that role he's worked in recent years with initiatives to foster entrepreneurs in Uganda, Kenya. He's established the Science Global South Graduate Fellowship and was a co-principal investigator on the OECD project Enhancing Food System Resilience. As the Carleton University biography suggests, if you want more information, read his CV on their website. Mike, we're delighted to have you with us today, and I'm pleased to hand the session over now to you. Questions or comments may be entered in the chat, or we'll have an open microphone session at the end. Mike, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank. And thanks for making me feel really old, having said all that. Hey, wonderful to be here today. Scrolling through things, I had a chance to say hi to some old friends, people I haven't seen for many years. Wish we could be together to have some refreshments after. For many new names out there, maybe one day we will actually get a chance to meet, whether it's virtually or perhaps at Frank's favorite spot, Irene's. Look, I just, it seems like it's an appropriate time to search for hope amidst the gloom. In no ways do I wish to understate the seriousness of where we are in terms of climate systems in this country. At the same time, I think we can get bogged down in that and get ourselves into trouble. So I want to just start with, I'm sure in our morning news feeds as we're walking or enjoying our coffee, we've come across headlines like this. The one in the top right, I pinched from the Globe and Mail recently. Other ones you can see there's there. And if, like I said, it can become pretty gloomy if we have a steady diet of this sort of reporting. This came out yesterday, so we could add to the gloom the latest part of it from the WMO in terms of carbon dioxide levels being at highest levels ever. And I think, they actually came up with some interesting things, especially to do with the feedback loops that are adding to it. So it's not just burning of fossil fuels. Having said that, though, I think it's also really important that we remember that there are these opportunities out there. And in fact, it's perhaps time that we really double down in terms of not only our attempts to be hopeful, but also our need to act in a positive way. And so it's with that in mind, I want to do two things today. We're going to quickly review why we're in this gloomy situation. I have 6 reminders relating to science and policy. I'll blast through that in about 5 minutes, okay? I think everyone in this audience knows most of this, and I just want to use that as a discussion starter, or setting the discussion. Then what I want to do is spend the next 30 minutes or so on the potential to pull back from the brink. Where's the hope? I've got a long list of things. I'm just going to cover a few today. We can talk about the others in the Q&A, and I will make the slide kit available that covers all of these things. So if you want more from this, we can arrange for it offline, or you can pick it up from the CMOS website. Having said that, I want to make a couple of points clear. Look, one of the characteristics of this seminar is and maybe some people might say one of its faults, is it's a kilometer wide and a centimeter deep. Having said that, I still need to put some boundaries on what we will cover and won't cover in the formal presentation. The stuff on the left over here is really about some of the things I will talk about in terms of hope. Could be pretty minor. Some of them could be major changes in the way we organize our lives. And I'm not going to discuss the size of these shifts, but that's an important debate to have. The other point I think that's important is, have we, in fact, hit tipping points in some of our Earth system processes? Again, critically important beyond the scope of today. And so I'm not diminishing either of these. It's just, we need to rein this in. So let's move on then to the 6 reminders quickly. So the first one is about the natural climate system. I'm sure everyone has seen these diagrams many times. The top left, the Earth's energy budget. Most of us know that their greenhouse gases occur naturally in our atmosphere at a fairly low level, but the key point is without those greenhouse gases, we'd be a frozen rock going around the sun. So they're essential to our climate system, to our life. The bottom right slide, the natural variability taken from ice cores. There's a few points here that are really important. One is variability is natural. It's been occurring for over 800,000 years. But in addition to there being variability, there's guardrails. And you can see that the CO2 levels hit some sort of high or some sort of low, and the same thing with temperature on this planet. And this is a pattern that is effectively now been going on for at least 800,000 years. So those are important key points about our natural climate system, or what's left of it. This is the only diagram that I put up that actually terrifies me. And again, I'm sure all you folks have seen this many times. Given that 800,000 year record when carbon dioxide was between 2 boundaries, we've now blown past it. So starting with the Industrial Revolution, especially since the early 1950s, when I was born, I won't take personal responsibility for this, but it is upon my generation in a lot of ways. We're now up around 424 parts per million. One of the interesting things is the amplitude of variation in CO2 over the last 800,000 years. We've almost surpassed that amplitude now. So that to me is we're going into the unknown. The next point I want to make is it's not just carbon dioxide and temperature that's changing. It's many other parameters in our climate system. Here's 4. And the reason I put these, at least we could use any 4 you want. The point I really want to make here is that if it was just global warming, that's an acute problem. So think of it as, you break your ankle, you go to your doctor, they send you to Emerge, and you get a cast on your leg, and a couple months later you're fine. It's an acute problem, it's localized, etc. But now if we look at it from a human health point of view, we've moved into the chronic complex stage of healthcare. And so, we have many things wrong. I realize these are related, but we are in fact attacking the whole system. The fourth reminder is we've made some very noble attempts at trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Kyoto and Paris are the most notable ones. But despite those, we haven't really been able to curb CO2 emissions. If you look at the top left graph, you can see that over this period, there have been times when we have seen periodic declines in emissions. The end of the Soviet Union, the financial crisis in 2008, and of course, COVID had huge impacts. And I'm not suggesting any of these are a good way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The point I'm making is clearly human systems are being impacted by our activities. The other point that I'll just bring here, I think that's really important from the WMO release yesterday, and remember this is the lead up to the next COP meeting. We're going to get a lot of these sorts of reports. The timing is not coincidental, but doesn't nevertheless diminish. It doesn't diminish it. So what we're seeing here, is yes, this is from fossil fuel emissions here on the on the left. But in terms of the amount of atmosphere, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, there's also the feedback loops that is recirculating carbon in the atmosphere. So, our attempts have been largely noble, but not successful. The other part is we're going to have an extremely uneven transition into the future. And if net zero is still on our list of things that we want to do, we could put up any number of these. We seem to have gone from a period of where there was considerable belief and commitment, or belief at least, that we should do something about climate change, into a period now where it's quite uncertain on what's going to happen. And, so to me, it's just, we can't expect, we can try to plot a pathway, but it's going to be extremely uneven. We're going to have perturbations. We're going to have times when people are very sympathetic and times when they're not. And that also, the whole area of misinformation is also part of that. And the last reminder I want to make is that pathway is going to be costly. This is just insurance claims compiled by Munich Reinsurance. And you can see that it's going up and up and up, and we've all seen these at home and so on. So I think these are really important points to remember to help set the context. But even as bad as things are, I think it's important that we state that, and when we put all of those 6 factors, reminders together, I think Paul Crutzen nailed it in 2002, when I believe that's when the term Anthropocene was coined, and Paul was making the point that human activities, we are now the equivalent of an Earth system process agent disruption. So let's keep that in mind. It is nasty. It is bad. We are perhaps on the brink. At the same time, as important it is to ring that alarm bell, let's not get paralyzed by it. And this recent diagram, or this recent article in the New Scientist, I think really has nailed it. There is not a time when we need climate action more than now. And that's where I want to spend the time today, is on this part of it. I also want to emphasize this is an uncritical review of pulling back from the brink. Some of the things I'll talk about are perhaps not possible. We perhaps don't have the political will, or the technology might not be there. Some might be easier to pursue under some circumstances than others. This is an important conversation, again, beyond what I'll talk about today, but please keep that in mind. In terms of organizing what we might think about in terms of hope and gloom, where that hope is, I've come up with 12 themes. I'm sure there's more. As a geographer background, I can't help but organize this around some areas that are meaningful to me, and that is the scale at which these activities occur, and also whether they tend to focus on mitigation, that is trying to prevent greenhouse gases from getting into the atmosphere or pulling them back and reducing the likelihood of climate change, or whether they're more about allowing climate change to happen and trying to adapt. There's too many to cover here. The ones with the check boxes beside them are the ones that I will spend a bit of time on today. It'd be like 3 to 5 minutes on each of those, and then we'll get into the Q&A period. Information with the other ones will be in the slide kit that will eventually make its way onto the CMOS website. So the first one is about carbon capture. Just let me back up. My reason for choosing these 6, I thought these are ones that perhaps are less, the audience might be less familiar with. And also, I just wanted to make sure we covered the whole breadth of things, from mitigation to adaptation, from international to local activities. Carbon capture is one that's had an awful lot of attention in the last 6 months or so, or the last while. And I just want to, be clear about one thing. There's 2 things happening out there that sometimes get confused. One is carbon capture, and this relates to trying to prevent greenhouse gases from getting into the air, into the atmosphere, at large sites, industrial sites or power facilities. Carbon removal, it's allowing carbon to get into the air, but it's somehow trying to pull it out. And there's direct air capture has received quite a bit of attention. And certainly some of the natural approaches to restoring carbon and locking carbon up, especially through reforestation, is also part of it. Today, I'm going to look at just carbon capture. And I think it's important we recognize It's not science fiction anymore. It is certainly way beyond aspirational. Here's some information in the top left from Alberta. Again, remember, it's about capturing emissions from large-scale industrial facilities and ensuring and putting them back into the ground, basically. The bottom figure here has been put together, and it's looking at potentially a six-fold increase in carbon capture capacity between 2021 and 2030. That's immense to do it, if that can be achieved. Like a lot of other new industries, there's perhaps overstatements on a regular basis about what the future potential is, but I think it's important to recognize that carbon capture is a substantial piece of the puzzle in terms of addressing climate issues in the future. A very quick introduction to the Pathways Alliance foundational project. People have probably heard an awful lot about the Pathways Alliance. It's been in the news a lot. It's going to be in the news even more, I suspect, in the next 6 months. I just want to put in a few key facts about it. So it's about carbon removal at the source. It covers, a large number of sites. We're looking at removing carbon getting into the atmosphere from about the production basis of about 3 million barrels of oil per day. The emissions, the expectation is to bring them down from 668 million tons down to net zero by 2050. And I want to emphasize here, net zero means net zero at the production point of view. That oil that's going to get pumped out of the ground is still going to get burned at some point and put carbon into the atmosphere. But so we're looking at trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the source. The main point I'd like you to take away from this is it's big. I mean, it's big in area, it's big in terms of costs, it's big in terms of the amount of carbon we're talking about in terms of capturing and eventually storing. So where does this fit in? And I think this statement from the World Resources Institute captures it, I think, in a really important way. There's a few key points here in this rather long statement. One is carbon capture is going to be critical in terms of our efforts to reduce our impacts on the environment, but also let's ensure it's not the only thing we're doing. It's quite limited, it's complementary, and there's some cases where eliminating the use of fossil fuels will be next to impossible, and that's where I think carbon capture can work. It is not, I think the sense is it will not be a solution in its own right. The next one I want to move on to is about comprehensive climate planning. I'm going to put Canada up first, okay? This was captured last fall, about a year ago now, and this is what the Trudeau government had put together. And I think it's actually extremely comprehensive. Now, the communications and the implementation perhaps aren't as strong as what we see on the paper here. But I mean, they cover an awful lot of issues regarding trying to reduce emissions, getting to net zero, and recognizing that we can't do everything, so we are going to have to adapt. The carbon pollution pricing that I've put an X through in this part of it, this is what Mark Carney eliminated on the first day, called the carbon tax. So this was, about those of us who drive cars that use a lot of fuel. We'll be paying a tax for it. If we don't use too many of those cars or do that too much, we actually are supposedly going to come out ahead. It's gone. Right now, the oil and gas emissions cap is really, I think, what's on the table. I don't think, there's various views that it's going to disappear. There's some views saying that this is going to be required if he's serious about carbon capture. We don't know. We're expecting a statement in the next while. If nothing else has come out of this, I think it's safe to say that Canada at least has gone through this process of trying to put together all of the pieces to put together a comprehensive climate plan. And let's not, even if this doesn't succeed, let's not forget the lessons that we've learned in terms of how comprehensive we need to be and where it's going. This one is about, this slide again about Canada. It's about the emission reductions we can expect from the various policies. Here is the fuel surcharge that's been eliminated. So not insignificant, but not the strength of the platform. Over here are the oils, the emissions from our large production systems. Those will be critical, and if those disappear, then the plan does fall apart. I just want to bring your attention to one other place, California. Very similar to Canada, the 8 points that they have down here you can see, map well onto the Canadian system with some different words. There's one significant difference here is they add cap and trade programs to it in terms of trying to reduce CO2 emissions. I won't get into what cap and trade is, but it is perhaps one of the more substantial economic tools out there that could be used. So I want to just put a plug in for Hopeful on the climate actions, comprehensive planning essential, and we're getting a fair bit of experience in how to put these plans together. Implementation, we have a lot of work to do there. In terms of, I want to now turn from national efforts to local efforts. And when I say local, I think it's important we distinguish between two types of local. One are, legal entities, municipal initiatives. The other are citizen groups. And I'm going to spend more time on citizen groups today because I think their role is, I think, really improving, really emerging, really enhancing the opportunities. So let's not forget them. But I will start off with the municipal one, the City of Ottawa, fairly typical. They have 4 strategic priorities. A city that is green and resilient is one of them. And what they basically have in here is a fairly typical package of things that you can find in many other documents relating to cities. One is that we prepare for extreme weather. The other is we do our best to reduce greenhouse gases, and we also do our best to ward off the nasty impacts of climate change. So, this is a fairly important part of the picture. When we look at the failure of Kyoto and the failure of, perhaps I shouldn't say failure of Paris, it's perhaps a bit premature to say that, but certainly limited. At this point, it's, the report card's not the best. And perhaps not, overwhelming evidence that we're doing things well at the national level. Let's remember cities play a huge role, but it's really a number of smaller actors, and coordinating that can be a bit of a challenge. So I'd like to turn now to community groups that can mobilize. Tay Valley is just west of here. Our moderator today, Frank, is part of this group. So these slides are courtesy of Frank. The point I really want to make here is this is an upstart. I believe they're quite young. They've only been at this now for a year or two, but it's very much about participation by citizens. It's not top down at all. And I think that's really an important strength, is getting people on board. So what we can do in each of these citizens group is interesting, but I think collectively getting people on board is just as important. Another one in the Ottawa area is Lanark County, Climate Network Lanark. And I just want to emphasize here that in terms of their work, the key points are very much about answering the question, what can I, as an individual, do in terms of climate change? And so a lot of their efforts focus on that sort of very individual level advice. So a very different process than what we can see, or what we've seen in terms of large national and international efforts, and must be applauded. The other area I want to go to is not all of the local actions are around organized municipalities. There's hundreds of these out there. I just chose this one, Energize Seniors, Seniors for Climate Action now. And they're a very forceful group, a lobby group, incredible talent in this particular group. They have the statement of, because we're older, wiser, angry, our children and grandchildren are responding, they need our support. I think that's really important. I'm not sure if they asked the children and the grandchildren if they want that support, but that's a separate issue. But the important point here is this is looking at radical change. I mean, to think of an economic system that is built on growth, but we're going to change it to sustainability. We're not going to talk about accumulation of wealth. We want to go to sharing of wealth, and we can work our way down. This is not a group that is looking at band-aids or minor changes around the edge. This is a group that recognizes the severity of this and is advocating for a substantial change in the way we do business and how that affects our climate systems. Another one is a group called Climate Fresk. It's an international organization based out of France. They're now working in, I think it's like 140 some countries. And it's quite interesting. Basically, what Climate Fresk is about is it's going the sort of environment that many of us live and work in. Well, great in terms of our professional communities. It's probably not the best communications tool in terms of getting people on board who are not involved in climate areas. And so they start with the IPCC report. They distill that into 40 some cards that capture the essence of those reports. You can see them here on this table. And it starts off with, there's 3-hour workshops. And what they basically do is they work through trying to get you to understand climate science. So they have a facilitator that does that. Once you understand the climate science, it's about understanding your interactions between you and climate science. So when I was talking to Sue and Tom at the beginning of this, they said when they took a course with me at Carleton, a non-credit course, I started off with, how did you get to Carleton today? And the point I was making was we were burning fuel in our cars and there was an impact on that. So something as simple as driving your car has a huge impact on the environment. So it really works on those things. And it also looks at ways to get at solutions. And so it's really about going from feeling powerless, all this gloom, to working your way through a better understanding and to, in fact, leading to actions. So I think a rather interesting and unique opportunity in terms of bringing climate science down to a local level, and in this case, to the individual level. In Ottawa, a colleague, Don Spruill, has become a facilitator. He's an accredited facilitator with Climate Fresk. Here's what Don has been able to accomplish in about 2 years. You can see that the main point is the workshops in Ottawa. There's been 53 of them, and they've been to the general public, they've been in the school system, and they've been in businesses. So an incredible opportunity, I think, to bring climate science to individuals, whether those be individual people, whether they be in the schools, or whether they be to individual businesses. And an opportunity, I think, to gain strength in terms of hope. At least I see there's hope there in terms of improving understanding and eventually action in terms of climate change. I just want to move a bit now beyond climate science itself and talk about two things. The first one is climate justice. Again, there's a number of groups that are involving. I'm just going to use this one as a way to introduce the topic. Some 10 years ago, Pope Francis introduced our care for our common home. And if you read through that, what's amazing about it is, I mean, the climate science is pretty amazing. The Vatican apparently has an incredible science team as part of its operations, but it's also translating it, confirming it, communicating it as a climate justice issue and using it as a way to really emphasize those that in fact are impacted the most by climate change are those that are least responsible. And this has been picked up by Pope Leo, and he recently had a conference on this about raising hope for climate justice. So not a lot of time today, but to me, this is, I think, a really important group that is now becoming part of the climate change ecosystem. And I see there's real promise here to try to move this forward. The other one I want to talk about is just quickly is climate change communications. This diagram of, what is this one, global surface temperature over a period of time and looking out to the future. For those of us working in the area professionally, this is our bread and butter. And I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I will confess personally, I've been at community meetings and put this sort of stuff up, and boy, if you really want to lose connection with your audience quickly, this is a good start. It is an incredibly powerful tool within the professional communities. At the same time, it doesn't tend to work particularly well, I would say, in a lot of local contexts with non-professional communities. And I just want to bring out two here, I think, that are particularly interesting, and it's to do with arts. One was now a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, in Ottawa, and it was about how kids see our changing planet. And it was an art display here in Ottawa. Absolutely brilliant in terms of alternative ways to communicate. And at the University of California, Santa Barbara, something similar, but not a bunch of kids doing it, a more professional program in terms of creating space for climate conversations through the arts. So let's remember, as important as our climate science is, our communication perhaps needs, we need to think about alternative ways to improve communications. The second last thing I think I want to talk about is loss and damage. This is something that is international in efforts. I've put it under adaptation, which is a bit of a clumsy fit. But it's something that the developing world, the global south, has been advocating for a number of years. The international programs typically organize themselves around climate science, mitigation, and adaptation. And those are really important, and those are the bread and butter of our international organizations. But sometimes through mitigation and adaptation, we cannot remove all of the serious negative impacts. And so for decades now, loss and damage has been advocated by many of the countries in the global south. And it's, as you can see here, it's about those unavoidable and irreversible impacts of the climate crisis. How do we deal with those? And it's a huge challenge. And there's some examples here what they talk about. It was sort of put on the margins of the international conversations until 2021, when it got a fair bit of airplay in the COP26 meeting in Glasgow, and it really moved up the agenda. Very important. So it became a topic that wasn't, you talked about on the periphery. It made it to something that was quite serious. But any efforts, so the seriousness of the topic was certainly noted, but at the same time, what was also happening at the same time was resistance to create a dedicated fund. And the main reason for that was it is effectively like an insurance policy with no boundaries. And so the liability concerns were reasons that the major powers in terms of financial production in this world worked very hard to not have it go forward beyond being a topic for discussion. At the COP meeting, the 27th meeting in 22 in Egypt, I was absolutely shocked. I was not expecting this, but it actually, a loss and damage fund was created. I'm not saying it was sufficient, but boy, what a first step. And this fund aims to provide financial assistance to the most vulnerable countries when they're impacted by climate change. Incredible statement. We have a long way to go, but in these sorts of approaches, these are tough things, and it's hard to put. It takes many, many years to put these together. So applaud 2022 COP27 for at least getting this to the stage where not only was it at a legitimate discussion point, it was also some money was put behind it. A few other things I think came out of that meeting. One was that the historical responsibility for climate change was now on the agenda. The diagram in the top left shows that historically 45% of all the carbon in the atmosphere comes from the high-income countries. And, so that was, I think, an incredible statement. The other part was it put liability squarely on the agenda as well. Something that I think was, something you couldn't even imagine 5 years ago. And here we are, in 2022, having it on the agenda. So sometimes ideas move fast. What doesn't move so fast is the actual implementation. And there's all sorts of disconnects inside of the loss and damage program. The one I want to draw your attention to is where this red arrow is down in the bottom here. And the estimated average cost of loss and damage by 2030 is estimated to be 435 billion. Okay, just remember that number, billion. Well, at that point, they had 300 million, not billion, 300 million committed in the way of pledges. So lots of work left. Let's not lose sight, though, that there is at least a framework to move this forward. Looking at last year's COP meeting, The frameworks, I think, were reinforced and remained in place, not challenged. The diagram on the right, I think, wraps it very well. Most of our efforts go into mitigation, adaptation. There's still some residual risk we need to deal with, but over here is loss and damage, what we can't actually put in place. So, or sorry, that we can't cover off. So let's make sure we work on that part of it in terms of loss and damage. There was, I think, some interesting steps forward at the COP29 a year ago now. One was the amount of money that was made available to protect people was certainly increasing. But I think this bottom one really captures it, where it says loss and damage at COP29, some progress made, but much remains. So it is a work in progress. It is an international activity. These things take a long time to play out. That is hard reality for those people that are being affected today. But I think let's not lose sight that there is promise here. Where my time was, Frank? I got 5 minutes. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. I just want to make the point that there's been a number of efforts to move climate change and environmental policy into the courts. There's all sorts of discussion around, should we be having policy set by courts? A very important discussion. Just quickly on 3 parts of this where I see hope. One is 5 years ago, 4 years ago now, there was in Quebec, a number of young people got together and started a class action suit against the government of Canada, that the rights of anyone under the age of 35 were being violated because Canada was not doing what it needs to do in terms of climate change. It was dismissed because it didn't meet the test of what is a group in terms of class action. So 35-year-old is a group was deemed to be arbitrary. There was no ruling on climate change in action and human rights. That changed last year in Europe, where European courts clearly made it an issue. It was in the context, in this case, of a seniors women's group in Switzerland, and it was upheld that their rights were being infringed by Europe not doing what it needed to do in terms of combating climate change. And this year, the International Court of Justice confirmed some of this again. So now an even higher level court, and human rights was one of the areas that it confirmed that climate change is a human rights issue. One of the other things that it confirmed was states could not simply say, oh, this is a global issue, therefore I can't do anything about it. That their responsibility, state responsibility, applies. So debates about whether or not the courts are the best place to settle this, but at the same time, it's certainly moving forward. And I think it is another prong, another lever that we have in terms of why we should be hopeful. I just want to talk very quickly about climate change and health, and especially about issues of mental health, just to introduce this topic. And it is, I think, a very hopeful sign is that this is now seen as a legitimate topic that we need to discuss. So the understanding and coping with eco-anxiety is something that was 2 years ago now confirmed by the Mental Health Commission of Canada as something we need to address. This up here, overwhelmed by the climate crisis. Those apologies for the terrible photography. I took those pictures. It was on a post office box, a mailbox in my neighborhood. And again, I couldn't have imagined that being something that I would see in my neighborhood. I have no idea who put it up, but just a sense of where the whole area of being overwhelmed by climate crisis is now a reality. 2 ways to do this. One is that we have direct experience with severe weather, whether it be a drought, a flood, wildfires, or we could be exposed to an overload of information. As an aside, last year, the year before, I can't remember now, for the first time in doing a course on society and climate change, I started off with, we're going to talk about things here that might resurrect some very difficult memories. And that is about your participation in an extreme event. And I know in my family, I have 3 people now that have been directly affected, whether it be an evacuation or property being damaged. So I think, it's important that we recognize this. I just want to make the point that talking is something about it is something that's really gaining strength, and it's becoming recognized as an important field. Here's some suggestions about how to keep climate change at bay. I just want to draw your attention to the first two here. One is our vocabulary. If we speak about climate crisis, if we speak about Armageddon is around the corner, then we're stirring up certain emotions. I know personally I won't speak about the war on climate change. I don't wish to invite the military into this activity. So let's be careful on how we do this. I'm not suggesting we downplay the importance that how bad it is. At the same time, let's be cognizant words do mean something. And the other is anxiety. The second point here, anxiety is not inherently bad. We face all sorts of anxieties in our life that we need to address. I've spent 3 or 4 slides on this. CMOS, the next seminar on Wednesday, the 5th of November, a colleague at Carleton, Stefania Maggi, is going to spend a whole seminar on it. So if you're interested, particularly in this whole area of climate change, mental health, and physical well-being, attention to that. Okay, I'll wrap it up now with just a couple of slides. Please, let's not underestimate how dire the situation is. This bizarro cartoon from many years ago, I think, nails it. We are in the Anthropocene. We are doing severe damage to our planetary systems, full stop. The next point is there is hope amongst that gloom. I covered off today 6 of them. I don't think this is an isolated topic. There's many more groups out there that are working on this, and there's many more dimensions to it than I've put forward. So let's be aware of that, and let's find places where we can contribute. The second last point I want to make is in terms of moving forward in our expectations, it's greenhouse gas reduction pathways are going to be completely chaotic. We can put together our 5-year plan. I doubt it'll be valid within 3 months. So there's a cartoon here in terms of Canadian context of why we might not do so well. Again, it's pretty easy to pick on the Americans these days, but certainly looking at reinvigorating the coal industry is something that we need to be alarmed about, and it's going to be a setback. The other part of it is the challenges are going to be incredibly tough. There's a number of views out there, many legitimate views, and we need to work through this. Lines from a Bruce Cockburn song that has absolutely nothing to do with climate change, Lovers in a Dangerous Time, I think, picks this up. But nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. We got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. That's the sort of future we have over the next decades in terms of trying to address climate change. So I'll wrap it up with it's really time for us to kick at that darkness, the gloom, till it does bleed daylight. That's the hope part of it. So, Frank, I'll end it there. Somehow we have to make this transition from gloom, not just to hope, but to action. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Mike. That was excellent and really thought-provoking. We very much enjoyed that. And a few glimmers of hope, which I think all of us will agree we need. While you're thinking of questions, yes, there's been a lot of direct experience. I think all of us have got family members and close friends where we're still clearing up mess from climate events or trying to sort out the after effects of it. I've wondered for many years whether the inaction over climate change is similar to the problem you face with addiction. And you have to wait sometimes until people are at a point of desperation. Do you think that is the case, Mike, or do you offer more hope than that and we should be doing things before desperation sets in?
I'm not sure about the analogy to addiction, Frank. I can understand why it's being raised. Having spent 30 minutes speaking about searching for hope amongst the gloom, I think we're getting pretty close to that rock bottom point that addicts find themselves in.
Right.
my concern would be that in some cases, as with addicts, we hit irreversible change. So pulling back might be quite difficult. I hope we can be, as humans, more insightful and be able to determine a way forward that is, better for all. In some ways, I think I'm extremely naive even saying that, given what's happening in the world today. I hope we don't hit that rock bottom. Certainly, I think many of us have colleagues, friends, family members who have gone through that process and have bounced back. Boy, I hope we don't go down that road, even though there seems to be lots of evidence we perhaps are.
Maybe I need to climb out of the gloom and listen to some more of your hope. Other people, we have one or two comments. I have one comment from Elaine in the chat, thanking you, Mike, and that she appreciated all of this, especially she thought the emphasis on communication was important. What additional comments do you have for improving communications?
Thanks, Elaine. Hey, wonderful. If it's the Elaine, I think it is. Good to hear from you. Hey, I think our mechanisms of communication are changing. Like I said, I can remember many years ago being at a community meeting and pulling up the standard IPCC charts in terms of climate scenarios and change, and boy, it was tough. I put an audience together. I put an audience to asleep pretty fast. It was numbing. So I think we need to tailor our communications to the people we're talking to. Is the best I can offer. I think there's incredible opportunity to have bottom-up action here and getting those groups on side. So that's where I see the local actions as being particularly valuable and particularly hopeful. Some work we did a number of years ago with someone whose doctoral research I was supervising, that they actually hired an artist to paint a number of scenes of the future. So rather than having the 4 or 5 top scenarios out of IPCC, they were actually, put up as murals, and it was incredibly provocative. And in terms of getting those communities engaged, a brilliant idea. So let's tailor our communications to the groups that we're trying to work with.
Good. There's a comment from Ramola Thombardo, thanking you for your overview and perspective and for the pointers to mental health. And then David Smith asked the question, there are many local citizen groups across the country. I'm part of one in Halton Hills. Are you aware of any national groups or meetings, etc., that bring these local groups together to share ideas?
The simple answer, David, is no, I'm not. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And it'd be a good point. I'd be interested to know what the agenda would be other than sharing information. And that might be really important. Is it about sharing information, about sharing ways in which they've tried to apply pressure, say, to their town council? Beyond that, I don't have an answer. So I don't know. Does anyone else know that are involved in these groups? I know that I believe SCAN does have a Canada-wide. It scans the Seniors for Climate Action Network. I believe they do have a Canada-wide network within SCAN, but I don't know how big I just don't know how big it is. Sorry, David, I don't have an answer for you.
All right, let me try another one. What role do you see for success stories in inspiring hope and further action? That's from P. Kirtland. Peter?
Thanks, Pam.
Pam? Yes.
Boy, I think that needs to be part of our bread and butter. I mean, just as we can't go down the road of, we're past the point of no return, I don't think we can sugarcoat it either. So I would say success stories are going to be very important, especially, when we think about the abundance of doom stories out there. It's easy to become paralyzed. So I think the notion of success is going to be something we need to bring forward. We need to show success. If it's always just another meeting, then I think, we're not going to get very far. Those factions of society that choose to pay no attention to climate change, or even worse, choose to diminish the role of it. We need to have strategies to fight them off, and I would think having success stories would be really important. One thing I can't provide any insight into, for those of you who can see me, there's an awful lot of snow on the roof here. I'm not a social media star, but I would think there's plenty of opportunity in the social media area in terms of climate change in a very positive way. And perhaps it's already happening and I'm just not in touch with it.
Simone Thuns has added another accolade. Thanks for a wonderful presentation, particularly for providing information about some local initiatives, and you've given her some ideas of who to reach out to. Hugh Finston, said, everything I've heard about carbon capture is that at this time it is not proven effective, and it is much too costly, despite attempts by the carbon industry to suggest it works. Is that incorrect?
No. I think, like many emerging parts of industry, there is an extreme oversell. And I think we need to recognize that, which is why I put that summary statement up by the World Resources Institute. I can't imagine a future where carbon capture is not part of it. I also cannot imagine a future where carbon capture is, if you will, the out front approach to trying to address climate change. It doesn't have that capability. In a limited role, I think it can play a very important role. And my understanding of carbon capture are the points that you made. I think the success stories are perhaps overstating what's possible today. In addition, scaling it up is a challenge financially and industrially. And the other part of it is, well, we stop emissions at the mining level. That oil is still going to be burned someplace. So when we hear someone talk about zero emissions from the oil sands, that means zero emissions in terms of the production process. It's not zero emissions in terms of how that carbon is, or how those fossil fuels are being used. So I think we need to be suspicious. At the same time, I don't think we can dismiss it.
And Bruce Angle has added a question. Reflecting on the adage, think globally, act locally, it is clear that municipalities have a major role in combating climate change, from housing policies to transportation systems and beyond. There are several groups working at that level, as you have mentioned, but ideally, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is a forum for exchanging ideas. Do you know if they're active in that pursuit?
Can't help you out on that one, Bruce. I don't know if the Federation is or not. I would suspect they are, knowing their advocacy role. But I just don't know if they do have that as a primary activity. And again, I think it'd be great to have that, but at the same time, I think we have lots of evidence that trying to coordinate everything is perhaps not getting us where we want to go, and letting municipalities be innovative in their own context, I think, is something we don't want to underestimate. I'm not suggesting we can't try to do some coordinating, and I think the Federation would probably be a great place. I just don't know. I suspect they'd be, but I don't know.
Okay. William Pugsley has asked, to what extent is nuclear energy a partial solution to carbon emission cuts, noting the objective to triple the production by 2030 by the Canadian government.
Whoa. Boy, is there a right answer to this one? If I have to choose between coal and nuclear, I think nuclear is a safer option. Hate to say it that way. I think we need to, if we are going to go down the road of greater reliance on electricity, generating electricity from burning gas or coal is not a particularly bright idea. We've seen in the province of Ontario how our emissions have been reduced enormously by the phasing out of coal. Right now, nuclear seems to be one of the options. I think the opportunities to pick up on renewables can't be lost. So to me, it's about I would suggest that we have the discussion around not nuclear versus fossil fuels, but we have nuclear's role in the future portfolio of electrical production vis-a-vis renewables.
Renewables, yes. John Reid was impressed by the temporary reductions in emissions due to COVID and economic factors, but they were overwhelmed by the long-term major increase. Doesn't that suggest that the solution must be orders of magnitude more than those? Isn't it more realistic to accept that we need to adapt until we can't?
Yes and no. How's that for sitting on the fence, John? The reason for that is, I'll just reflect personally. As part of the group that really tried to push adaptation forward in the 1980s, to the point where, a handful of us that were doing that were accused of undermining efforts to mitigate climate change. And we persisted. And I now look at it and I go, and my rationale at that time was, for many places, they weren't participating in a substantive way in terms of loading of carbon into the atmosphere. Why should they try to mitigate? They have nothing to mitigate, so they better adapt. I'm not sure I went down the right path in the 1980s. Maybe it should have been more about mitigation. I think today's reality is adaptation has to be part of it. I would continue, I guess, to argue that. At the same time, in the last couple of IPCC reports and elsewhere, it's become evident that we cannot adapt our way out of this problem. So yeah, let's get on with adaptation. At the same time, that does not imply that mitigation, that we ease off on mitigation in any way. It means we need to step it up. And I think, again, that's where loss and damage comes in, because we're not going to have a solution where we're not going to have, I'm having it more and more difficult to think of a future where what we can't mitigate, we can adapt to. I still think there's a residual there. Thanks, John, for the question.
Yeah, excellent. I think we have to finish this discussion reluctantly. I'm tempted to say that we need other opportunities to carry on and listen to your other points. David Smith has put in a link to Green Municipal Fund, which is in the chat, and we'll make sure that goes along with the talk when we do finally publish it. So many thanks again, Mike, for going through this with us. We will, as you mentioned, be continuing with the theme on November the 5th, when we hold our first in-person meeting since the pandemic at Carleton University, led by Professor Stefania Magi, and all the details for that may be found on our website if you haven't copied them down already from Mike's slide. So many thanks. And many thanks to everybody for attending. We look forward to seeing you again in just a few weeks' time. Goodbye.